right? This particular coursework is worth 15% of your overall mark, okay? And the deadline for this assignment is the 26th of November, okay? Basically, a few days before we move into going to the exam period, essentially. So,
Sir,
yes.
by any chance, do you have an indication as when the exams are going to be held? Because so far we haven't received anything except for the general timetable more than anything.
Essentially, that's the only thing that I can tell you. I only know the general timetable as to when, as in the academic calendar. Essentially, you receive that one.
Yes.
Essentially, from my point of view, that's the information that I have. Quite honestly, because I'm not the one who actually organizes and schedules the timetable for it.
I thought you might have some insider information, definitely.
As of yet, to be quite honest, up to a few days ago, it was still a bit unclear whether it was going to be held online or in person. I think now the decision has been made that it's going to be held online, at least for this session. At least that's what the principal has decided. So obviously, given that decision was taken recently, I would assume that they're currently working on the timetable. I would imagine, and you should soon be receiving information from the registrar regarding the examination timetable and whatnot. Okay?
No worries. Thank you very much.
All right. Right. So, the assessment outcomes for the learning outcomes for this particular assignment are to help you appreciate the importance of market research and to conduct one. So essentially, it's similar to the assignment that you had for your first assignment, if you will, but with an added constraint, if you will. Okay, to keep abreast with current system requirements available on the market and to provide evaluation and recommendation within a requested budget. Okay. Again, it's important keep in mind with regards to your submission. All right, so you make sure that you submit online. PDF, the only PDFs are accepted. All right, make sure that you've written your work in English. All right, and make sure to answer all of the questions, because obviously any questions that are not answered, unfortunately, cannot actually be given any marks. All right. Also, make sure that you make use of referencing. All right, kind of like in the same way, in the same methodology that we basically discussed for your first assignment. If you remember, making use of Microsoft referencing tools or Google document referencing tools, all right, in order to help you generate an academic report, essentially. Okay. Obviously, if there might be any doubts with regards to the validity of your work, St. Martin's reserves the right to maybe call you up for a one-on-one meeting in order to understand what you've done, and maybe would be able to will be asking you questions in order to explain your work. Obviously, the thing that I would like to point out is the idea of plagiarism. Obviously, don't do it. It's very important that you reference other people's work. All right, even if you're paraphrasing other people's work in your own words. Okay, it's important that you state what is your work and what isn't your work, especially what is not your work, using the APA referencing system that we had discussed last time. Okay? Right, so this is the assignment question. So essentially, a new office is being set up and it's comprised of 20 personnel. as follows: one manager, one secretary, one technical person, and the rest are clerks. All right, as part of the setup, a new IT equipment needs to be purchased. The manager has requested your services as a consultant to recommend the necessary software and hardware. The manager also provided you with the following details and conditions. So the first condition is that all computers are of standard office use and do not require any particular software other than office work and web access. Right. Secondly, all right, you cannot look at mobile equipment, so only desktop PCs or their equivalent are to be considered. Thirdly, all computers need um, to be ready to use and must have an operating system installed on them together with standard software. Preference is being given to buying complete systems, but if you prefer to purchase individual items and assembling and installing everything, you may also do that at your own discretion. But obviously, you need to provide justification. All right. The office also needs to have at least one printing and scanning station, and these are combined in one or separate as you may deem necessary. So you might go for an all-in-one printer, photocopier, scanner, for example, or something which is dedicated. So a printer, a scanner, but obviously you would need to justify your reasons, right? The budget available for this exercise is part of an EU funding program and is fixed at 20k, right? 20,000. Right? You cannot overshoot the budget by even 1 cent. Right? The manager insists that you use as much of it as possible. Hence, if you have money left, see how to allocate it wisely. For instance, you may decide to buy extra software or hardware that you may think that the company might need. All right? The budget above excludes software Office. However, the manager would like to have Microsoft Office installed on the machines. Thus, further to the above, you are to find an indication of how much such a license would cost and how many and how you may find the necessary funding for it. Okay. Your job is to conduct the necessary market research and provide a recommended solution to the manager. All right. You must include all sources of your information as well. So this is important again. Okay. So what is the structure of your report? So you would yes. Sorry.
Yes, for a quick clarification, if I may.
Yes.
With regards to the first part, the hardware that we are going to look at, it states that there are no mobile devices will be taken into consideration, and the desktop PCs or their equivalent. When you say their equivalent, you meaning laptops as well, or no?
No, what I'm saying is that PCs, the term PC is usually used for Windows systems. So you might want to go for Mac or Linux or whatever.
I see. I see. All right. Okay.
So
actually, physical power, CGFERI,
we're talking physical towers here.
all right. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Yes, I'm sorry. I want to ask you if the price needs to include the peripherals as well, or just the towers?
Yes, it's a new system, so essentially you would need to include mice, keyboards, monitors, I would suppose.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
And you need to also have the one printer system at least, or you need to have printing, scanning facilities essentially. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yes. So ultimately, we should end up with just one quotation, right? Not with several like the other assignment where we ended up with two.
And what you can do here is you can earmark, for example, 3 or 4 different systems that you see that they're additive, and then you say this is for this particular reason I'm choosing option A instead of option B or option C. To say
Okay, got it.
I found these 4 different types of systems, for example, they all would fit the bill essentially, but you would recommend going for option A, option B, or option C, or option D. All right, and then you justify your reasoning. All right.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask one final question, please, if I may?
Yes, of course.
With regards to the 20,000, ISA, the 20,000, that is inclusive or exclusive of VAT? Since it is a company, they can claim back the VAT, which would give us an 18% schedule, more breathing space, more than anything.
All right, that's a good point. What I can tell you is, for the time being, consider it inclusive of VAT. If necessary, I will come back to you and I will actually, because I obviously needs to have consensus with my colleague from the full-time course. All right.
No problem.
There won't be 2 different variations. All right. But we'll I'll get back to you, and if necessary, we would also put a post up on Moodle. All right. Usually, my colleague Dunstan Griffla used to send messages in order to remind you about submissions that led to check. And in a very similar fashion, we'll be able to send you a message regarding the inclusiveness of VAT.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let me just actually write it down so that I do not forget.
Sorry, what was your point on VAT again?
Excuse me.
What was the point on VAT again, please?
The point behind the VAT option is, as Kenneth was alluding to, if you have a company and you're starting off buying off new computer hardware, then essentially you would be able to claim back VAT on the purchase. So essentially, most companies wouldn't actually take into consideration prices including VAT. So that 18% would actually be a bonus amount of money that you can actually spend out of that 20,000, because you're going to get that back anyway. You understand?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Let me just finish this thing on this closed. Will be right page means. All right. So, moving on to the structure of the report. So essentially, you need to submit one PDF. The report should be as follows. So the first page should be a cover page showing all of your relevant details, including your SM number, your name, program that you're studying, etc., as well as the title of the assignment. It should also include an introduction where you're going to briefly state what you are going to be presenting throughout the rest of your assignment. The recommended equipment section, so essentially this provides the details of the equipment that you're going to be recommending for the employees in this case. All right. You may also need to include diagrams and a complete list of hardware specifications, as well as where you're going to obtain them from. Okay. One thing that I do know is that if you're actually going to go for systems which you're going to be purchasing abroad, you would also need to include shipping, okay? And any tax duties if they're coming in from places like the UK or the US or whatever, okay? You need to create an expense report. So basically, you need to have an exhaustive list of the expenses that you are recommending with the overall total costs. Marks will be affected by the accuracy of your total in relation to the allocated budget. You will also need to provide the justification for the choices of your recommendations. This should also include, but is not limited to, the choice of recommended hardware and equipment, essentially, that you're going to do. And finally, you also need to include a conclusion in which you conclude briefly on what the assignment is all about and what you did within the assignment, but also being a bit of an academic report, you need to also state what you learned from that assignment. Okay? I can already tell you, all right, because I've just conferred with my colleague, that with regards to the VAT, it should be exclusive of that. All right, so essentially, you should look at the price before the value-added tax is added. Okay, so not including VAT.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So obviously, try to be smart in the way that you write up your report. All right, make use of subheadings and sections in order to divide your work accordingly. All right, and also be able to create a table of contents very, very effectively with the tools that are provided to you by Microsoft Word. All right, start each section on a new page. Where necessary, use diagrams and explain them. All right. If not diagrams, you could also use pictures that you find off the internet. But if you're going to use pictures, make sure that you reference them as well. All right. Use a professional layout, no fancy fonts. All right. At the end of the day, we want them to be legible. All right. And all information, including diagrams, must be well referenced. Use spelling and correct grammar checks. All right. Again, remember that it is an assignment for a diploma or a degree, so it is expected that you have good technical detail as well as valid academic record. And the marks are split up like so. So you have 25% reserved for your introduction, 25% for the recommended equipment, 20% for the expense report, 30% for your justification, 5% for your conclusion, and then you have another 10% and 5% used for presentation and referencing, all right, respectively. Okay? Any other questions that you'd like to ask me about this
This
particular
this,
assignment?
this will be uploaded in Moodle maybe later on.
Yes. Yes.
Because I think it's not yet, right?
I don't believe it is. Let me just double check. Because I was told it was going to be uploaded by my colleague. No, it hasn't been uploaded yet, but it will be uploaded probably by tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks.
So, in a very similar fashion, okay?
So,
Yes?
with regards to the 20K, the 20K include only the hardware and the software, right? Not the installation as well. But we have to take that into consideration as part of the pricing.
No, that you need to take into consideration. No, if you're going to assemble, Mala, if you are going to you're going to provide a report. Essentially, you are a consultant, and you're going to basically tell them, listen, it is going to cost you so much in order to buy the equipment, and so much in order to buy the software. If you're going to go for individual components, okay, you might argue that the actual components themselves are compared to a pre-built system, for example, would actually be cheaper if you had to buy them individually, and if you had to buy them in bulk, in this case, 20 at a time, they might be even cheaper still. Okay, but then you would also need to indicate, for example, how much it would probably cost in order to assemble each and every one of those computers, because obviously nobody's going to do that for free.
Definitely.
You know,
Oh,
I've built computers in the past, and usually it takes me about 3 days in order to get it up and running the way that I want it. You know?
One question, please,
Yes.
because I did not manage to read the first part. Since we're going to consult or provide quotation to buy or purchase computers and software, should we consider that there is the network the network items already in place, the sockets and everything, or we have to include that as well? I mean the network structure, infrastructure.
You would probably need to include um,
Because I believe if they are desktop and we have to include a server, for example?
no, a server, no.
Okay.
A server, no. But maybe a router, yes. Okay, maybe a router followed by a switch, for example. You know, a 20-port switch, for example, or a 24-port switch. Or I think they go up in values of. So you can either get 6, 8, 16, 24.
24.
So it probably would make sense to include that as well.
Because I think the network infrastructure, without the network infrastructure, they won't be able to work together. So,
But you would be, but then you cannot really then.
or should we assume that they are already there?
No, I don't. We haven't given you, for example, a layout of the building, for example. So I'm not going to expect you to say, all right, then you need so many meters worth of cabling in order to pass data cables, you know. I'm not going to expect that out of you. But you can assume that the data cables have already been passed around, right? So each individual has their own ports that they can actually plug into, and if you need to say, listen, we need a 2-meter cable for each computer, you know, that would be fine. You could also say, listen, I'm not going for a wired system, I'm going for a wireless system, for whatever reason. All right. Again, justify, you know, obviously, if you're going for a wireless system, then you would need to have a system that already supports a wireless connection. But again, there's not one correct route. Obviously, if you're going for a wireless system, all right, then you wouldn't need to spend so much on cables, for example, or on switches or something of the sort. You know, because a good wireless system can actually support 20 devices connected at any given point in time. But on the other hand, if you're going for a wired system, then you're going to have more security. Also, justified. At the end of the day, you do have, according to this, you have 30% worth of your more worth of justification. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Right. So that is your Principles of Computer Architecture second assignment. I'll now move on to the other assignment. All right, for information security. All right, the title of this assignment is called Academic Research and Botnets. All right, second assignment as well, and the aim is to appreciate the value of academic research and learn how to use Google Scholar and learn a little bit about botnets as well. Okay. Again, this assignment is worth 15% of your grade. All right, and the deadline is still Friday, the 26th of November. Okay. So essentially the learning outcomes are for you to appreciate what academic research is, learn how to conduct academic research, learn how to use Google Scholar, and learn about botnets. So this is exactly the same form of instruction. So essentially, we still need you to write a PDF. We still need you to write it in English, and we still need you to upload it onto Moodle. All right, where there's going to be the upload page. Again, this is not going to be within the Principles of Computer Architecture page. You're going to need to upload it in the Introduction to Information Security page. All right, so the Moodle page of SMC 10314. Okay, and obviously you need to answer all of your questions, just like with the previous assignment that we talked about. Again, no plagiarism, in no form is it acceptable. All right, make sure that you cite all of your work, including pictures. All right, and make sure that you use the APA referencing system and make use of the Microsoft Word and Google Docs referencing systems. So this is the assessment question or the assignment question. So when studying for a diploma or a degree program, there will be many situations where you will need to conduct some form of research. This is necessary, and you will need to gather information in a particular subject, evaluate it, and present it in your own work. In today's world, the internet undoubtedly provides an invaluable reservoir of information. However, we must be careful as not all sources are academically sound. For instance, blogs and forums are not accepted as academic sources as they merely express opinions of people or a group of persons. Alright? For a source that is academically sound, it needs to have gone through a review process by other academics before eventually being published in a journal or presented at some conference. Google Scholar, is a search engine specifically built for scholarly articles. This search engine looks up documents specifically within the academic world and not anywhere on the web. Right? Some of these documents are available free of charge, whilst others require a payment or subscription depending on where the particular document is hosted. The assessment or the assignment is geared to help you appreciate the importance of using academic sound sources as well as to get started getting familiar with Google Scholar. This search engine should be an integral part of your research tools along your program of studies. Alright? So take this assignment as a sort of like precursor for other assignments where you're actually going to need to do a lot more research on your own, okay? In order to continue your studies. So the first task is basically in order to get you more familiar, all right, with Google Scholar. All right. So the first part of the assignment goes as follows. So you need to log in Google Scholar. So you go onto this link. All right. And you need to type in this bar. All right. Data Protection Act. All right, and hit enter or hit the search button. Okay. Once you do that, all right, you would be given a number of different sources. All right, this is basically what Google Scholar would look like when you type in Data Protection Act. All right. Now, there are some points that are worth mentioning. All right, which I'm highlighting over here as A, B. All right, especially this part here, and C over here. Okay. So if we take a look at part A, all right, A is basically a set of filters that you can apply to your search. All right. In this case, it filters in terms of dates. Okay. In our world, all right, of computing, it's very, very important that we keep up to date. So certain information might be outdated, all right, and you don't need it. We don't want to actually search sources which are outdated. We need to keep our research as current as possible. So we tend to look for sources which are no older than 10 years old, right, in order for them to be valid. So that's the first thing, and this is basically how you can actually do it by specifying a range of time that you're going to allow certain finds to come across. B, all right, which is basically this area here, which is highlighted in blue, all right, basically dictates, all right, the relevance of that particular article. It basically tells you how many times that particular has been cited. Okay, right? In this case, we can see we have two articles that have popped up. One is called Data Protection Act. The other is called Confidentiality and the Data Protection Act. One has been cited 56 times. The other has been cited 126 times. In this case, the second one, all right, the second source is more well respected for the simple reason it has been cited by more people, essentially. The more people have cited that particular source, the more credible it becomes. Okay, essentially. Okay. And finally, over here, part C, you should also be able to see links which would be able you to access that information. Sometimes they would be download links, sometimes they would just be links to a web page, all right, where you would be able to read that particular information. Okay, if you don't have those links, then essentially probably that particular paper, that particular conference journal, that particular chapter, whatever, is behind some sort of payment gateway. All right, so you wouldn't be able to access it immediately, at least. All right, or a subscription gateway, essentially. Okay, so those are the three areas that you need to keep in mind with regards to Google Scholar. Okay, so for task one, you will submit screenshots to show that you've actually went through this process yourself. All right, and include a brief description of what you did in order to get to where you were. Right. So that's your first part. It should be relatively easy, basically getting to know the system. All right. Your second task, all right, of this assignment is to conduct your own research using Google Scholar. So essentially, you're going to use the same procedure that we've talked about in task one, all right? But in this case, you're now going to look for the topic of botnets, all right? So you need to look for academic sources on Google Scholar that focus on botnets, especially within the last 5 years, right? It's important that you include that search restriction, all right? And from those articles that you find, explain what botnets are and provide some background information together with relevant examples, all right? All in all, the second task should amount to around 500 words, and include screenshots of how your searches and results appeared on Google Scholar. All right. In this case, searches from Google Scholar only will be accepted. All right, and needs to be complemented with the respective screenshots. All of your sources of information and images, all right, needs to be appropriately cited. When I say images, obviously I'm talking about images, not screenshots, because those are you are creating those screenshots, all right. But you need to cite any images that you might have used from these sources, all right. And again, you need to use the APA referencing system, and like we have talked about when we talked about referencing in Microsoft Word. Okay. Again, structure of the report very very similar. So first page should be your cover page with your name, SN number, program of study, etc., etc., etc. Follow that up by a table of contents. It's always good practice to include a table of contents. Follow that up by an introduction, again, to introduce briefly what you're going to be seeing within this assignment. 4, provide your answers for task 1 and task 2. And 5, include your conclusion. In your conclusion, you simply say what you have learned and what you have found maybe challenging about this particular task. Okay? Obviously, again, use subheadings in order to split your work accordingly. One doesn't really like to see one whole block of text in order to read, all right? It's not an essay writing competition, all right? Try to start each new section on a new page, all right? Include diagrams where necessary and explain them, all right? Use templates, the templates that were provided in order to make your work look professional, and all information, including diagrams, should be referenced. And obviously, you need to make use of good spelling and grammar, right? And here is your marking scheme, all right? So 5 marks for your introduction, 5 marks for task 1, 50 marks for task 2, all right? 5% for your conclusion, 15% for your presentation, and 20% on your referencing. Since this assignment is designed in order to teach you how to make use of referencing a bit more than maybe other assignments. Okay? Any questions with regards to this assignment?
Nope, none from my end.
Okay.
I'm okay as well, thank you.
Right? Okay. So those are the 2 assignments that I have for you. In due course, you will also be receiving feedback on the assignment, on the first assignment that they have also submitted, which I'm currently in the process of correcting. Sorry. Right. So, right. So last time we were talking about different numerical representations of binary. I do realize, however, that I forgot to mention something in particular in class. All right. We had discussed the idea of how binary addition would work. So essentially, if we had this number, say 10111011, for example, and we add that with 110011, what would be the answer? Essentially, what we have done was we said that whenever we have 1 added with 1, 0 equal 1, all right? When we have 3 ones added with each other, it's 1 equal 1, all right? And so on and so forth, all right? 1 plus 0 plus 0 is 1, 1 plus 0 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 0 equal 1, 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 1, There is a 1. Alright, 1 plus 0. 1 and 1 plus 0, essentially, right, is 1. And hence you have your answer. Alright? What we didn't talk about is what about other operations? So what about times? What about division? What about minus? So let's do the same thing, all right? So I'm going to use the same numbers this time around for minus, all right? For the negation operation. So we have 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, minus this time around 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. Actually, let me modify slightly this number because I would want to show you what would happen in this situation right here. All right. So in this case, it's quite easy to figure out what's going to happen. 1 minus 1 is going to give us what?
0.
0. So 1 minus 1 is 0. 1 minus 1 is 0. But over here we have a bit of a conundrum. So essentially over here we have 0 minus 1. We cannot actually do this. So what are we going to do? Well, we'll need to borrow from the next significant bit. All right. So essentially, this would need to become 0. All right. And this, instead of 0, this becomes 1, 0. Basically, this is now 2 base 10. All right. Essentially. So now we have 2 minus 1. 2 minus 1. That's going to give us 1. Alright? Like so. Alright? 0 minus 0 plus 0. These will cancel each other out because 1 minus 1. 0, 1 minus 1 is 0. 0 and minus 0 is 0 and 1 minus 0 is 1. So this would basically be your answer. Alright? When we talk about minus. Alright? Let's try a different example. Okay? So, in no particular reference, Floyd, could you give me an 8-bit binary number?
Any number?
Yeah, any number. 8-bit binary number.
So 001 00 101.
101 like this.
Yes.
Okay? And give me a 4-bit binary number. Another one.
0011.
0, 0. And then let's do it the other way around. 1, 1, 0, 0. All right? 1, 1, 0, 0. Okay? In order to give us a situation where we cannot actually borrow from the next one. All right? So again, in this case, all right, we have 1 minus 0, that gives us 1. 0 minus 0 give us 0. 1 minus 1 give us 0. So far, so good, right? However, over here we're in, okay, where we cannot actually borrow from this one, from this next neighbor. So essentially, we will need to borrow from the next significant bit. So essentially, this becomes 0. This becomes 2, essentially. But now we need to borrow from this. We need to borrow from this too. So this becomes 1. whereas this becomes 2. All right? Okay, so remember that when I have a 1, 0, that is 2 base 10. Okay, whereas this 1, 0 is 2 base 2. Okay, so now I have 2 minus 1. That gives us 1. This 0 is now a 1. So that will remain 1 because we have 1 minus 0 essentially. And the rest would remain 0. So we'll have 0, 0, 0, base 2. And we'll have our answer right there. Are there any questions with this particular methodology?
Better.
All right.
Could you explain again why we consider it as 2?
Manner. In a very similar manner. If I were doing, let me just do it on this side so that you'll be able to see what I'm trying to say. So if I have, I don't know, 12 minus 7, all right? Essentially, over here, what am I doing? If I look at these individual units, all right, like so, okay, you would know that I cannot take 7 out of 2,
Base 10. Okay.
all right, base 10. So what would I need to do? I would need to borrow the 10, all right, or 1/10 from this area. So instead of 10 of this being 2, it will actually be 12. Essentially, that's what we're doing each and every time whenever we're doing arithmetic. You know?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So essentially, what we're saying is this we're no longer going to consider it, but we're now going to add 10 to this number that we have over here. In which case, this becomes 12. Right? And now we can actually perform that that negation essentially. So in this case, we'll have the value of 5 being our answer. Correct?
Right.
So in a very similar fashion, okay, we're doing the same thing over here. Okay, so we need to borrow from the previous, from the next most significant, more significant bit.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you.
Can
Can
I
you
ask you
hear me?
something, sir?
One by one. So, Charles, I think
Oh,
you
I'm not sure if the other one was before me.
No, go ahead, Charles. Go ahead.
What I was going to ask you, sir, if there are 3 zeros instead of 2, are we coming for it later on, maybe?
No, let me see if I understood your question.
Because there were 2 zeros and you borrowed from the second one.
Let's say,
Instead of 0, 0. Okay.
let's say we have something like this.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
minus 1.
Mhm.
All right, so we have more than.
Okay.
All right. So, what's the answer actually going to be? Well, so we cannot. We have 0 minus 1, so we cannot do that negation.
No.
So we need
So I have to borrow.
But I cannot borrow from here, so I'll have to borrow again. I cannot take from here, so I'll have to borrow again. But I can't take from here, so I'll have to borrow again. So this becomes 0. This becomes 2. Alright? However, we need to borrow over here, so essentially we're going to take 1 from this 2. So this from 2 is going to become 1. And this is going to become 2. But we still need to borrow from over here. So this,
So it keeps recurring.
yes,
Okay.
this becomes 2. And again, all right, finally, what will happen is that we need to borrow also from over here. So this becomes 1 and this becomes 2. So we have 2 minus 1, right?
That's 1.
Give us 1, all right?
Okay.
1 minus 0 will give us 1, 1, 1, which will make sense if you look at the binary patterns of progression of how they actually keep on going up. All right, they actually make sense. In fact, if I have to convert this number, all right, so 1, 2, 4, 8, this would be 16. 16 minus 1, all right, should give us 15. We have 8, 4, 2, and 1. 8 plus 2 is 10. 4 plus 1 is 5. All right, so 5 plus 10 is 15. So essentially, the answer does make sense.
Okay, thanks.
Floyd, you had a question as well.
No, I figured it out while
All
while
right.
you were speaking. No worries. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm okay now, thank you.
All right. So we talked about essentially addition and subtraction. What about multiplication? So let's try a simple multiplication system. So let's say that we have, I don't know, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, for example. All right. And let's say that I'm going to multiply this by 1, 1, 1. All right. How am I actually going to go about it? So essentially, it is going to follow a very similar concept to what we used to do in terms of multiplication, all right, or the long multiplication that we used to have in mathematics, if you remember, all right. So let's say let's make it a bit simpler. So let's say that I had this in decimal. So we had 2, 1, 3, for example, multiplied by 15. Okay. Well, let's multiply by 12. All right. So essentially, what we can do is I can take the values, all right, that I have in terms of their individual units. So over here we have 2 units. So what I can do is I can take 2, 1, 3 and multiply it by 2. All right, so that will give me the value of 4, 2, 6. All right, so this is basically the multiplication of 2, 1, 3. Write it down here. So this is 2, 1, 3 multiplied by 2. All right, gives us that value. All right, but we also need to multiply this 10. All right, so essentially I need to also include the factor that is going to be the multiplication that is going to be affected by this particular unit over here. So essentially, if I've already considered this 2, now what I have is the value of 10. So if we take this number here and multiply it with 10, I get the following value. So 2, 1, 3. And since I'm multiplying it by 10, I would need to add a 0. And we'll continue that long multiplication by actually then adding each digit with its corresponding digit. So 6, right, plus 0, 6, 2 plus 3 gives us 5, 4 plus 1 plus 5 as well, and we have 2, 5, 5, 6 as our answer. All right, so essentially what we're saying here is that we have 2, 1, 3 multiplied by 10. All right, if we actually check it out using something like a calculator, right? 2, 1, 3, oops, 2, 1, 3 multiplied by 12 plus that answer. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is exactly the same thing over here. However, since we're talking about binary, then our calculations are going to be somewhat easier to a certain extent. All right? So, we have this over here represents a 1. Okay? So, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be literally copying the value that we have over here. So, we have 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0. So, essentially, I've used this value. Alright? Now I'm going to need to copy this value. Notice that it is 1 digit away from the least significant bit. So I would need to compensate that with a 0, kind of like how I needed to compensate that with a 0 over here for my 10s, if you remember. And then I'll take 1 and multiply it with the rest. So essentially I have copied the same number. Alright, so 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. So I'm done with that as well. Okay? And then I do the same thing with this last digit over here. So I'll have 0, 0 being basically for the placement, essentially. And then I copy the rest of the number. So 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. And then all you need to do is add. Okay? So 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 0. 1 plus 0 plus 0 is 1. 1 plus 1 plus 0 is 0. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1 plus 1 is carry the 1. 1 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1 is 0. Carry the 1. Right? 1 plus 1 plus 0 plus 0 is 0. Carry the 1. Right? We have 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 1. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 1. Carry the 1. And 1 plus 1 is 0. Carry the 1. And that is basically going to be our answer.
Yeah.
Yes?
In case you have like 4 ones, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1.
Okay. So, in the case that we have 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. Okay, let's try it out. Alright? So, let's say that we have this number. So 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Alright, so 5 ones multiplied by 1, 1, 1. Alright? So let's do the multiplication for each digit. So you'd probably agree with me that this would be for our first digit. For our second digit, it would be 0, 1, 1, 1, 1. Alright? That's for my one, another one over there. And for my last digit, it would be 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, and 1. Like so. I would assume that up to this point, nobody has any issues with the methodology that I've just used. Yes?
No issues.
No issues.
Alright. So, now, if we are trying to add 1 with 0, 0, that is 1, this is going to be giving me 0, carry the 1. However, this is what we're going to end up with. We have 4 ones in this case, right? So in essence, what is 4 ones? 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. In the decimal, that would give us 4, correct? So essentially, 4 in binary, if you remember, so 4 base 10, that is equal to 1, 0, 0 base 2. So essentially what we need to do is we need to do 0, carry the 1, but not instead of on this row, on this one over here. So you skip a row. Okay?
You have 5 ones.
Alright, understood.
In this case over here, we have 1, 1, 1. So that is essentially 3, right? 3 base 10, all right? Which is equal to 0, 1, 1, okay? So essentially, that's why we need to do 1 carry the 1. So that's 1 carry the 1. Now in this case, this value over here, this is 5, all right? Because we have 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, all right? So that essentially we'll need to do something similar to what we did with the 4, all right? But instead of having 0 carry the 1, but two digits over, we'll have 1 carry the 1 2 digits over here, like so. Okay? In a very similar fashion, over here, we have 1 plus 1, and 0, carry the 1, alright? 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 1, 1. Alright, we can also, if we want, double check our work, okay? So, let's work in binary. So, we have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Alright, so 5 ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to multiply it by 1, 1, 1. The answer, so it's 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1. So that is your answer. You understand this notion?
So if it's 5, for example, you skip another row, does it work that way just to get it right?
Remember when we had 4, right? Over here we had 4, so 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 ones. Yes?
Yes.
Now, 4 in binary is 1 followed by 0 and 0. Okay? So in order to represent that 4, we'll need to write 0 down here. Skip 1 row, alright, which is this one, and carry the 1 in the next row. Yes?
Alright,
Do you understand that? Now, in the case of when we have the number 5, in this case, since we had to add 3, right? Together we had to do 1 and carry the 1, like we normally do. Okay? But by doing so, we actually now have 1, 1, 1, 1, and 1. These are 5 ones. Essentially, I want to represent the number 5. So I will need to write 1 down here, right? Which would basically be this one over here. And we'll carry this one. So we'll have to skip a row, all right, and carry that one over there.
Okay.
alright.
All right? And then you continue with the numbering system, people, as in, the idea is always going to be the same, people, in that sense, okay?
Alright, so basically we have to keep in mind how it's represented in binary. Basically, it will help a lot.
Yes, it would help a lot. I would suggest also, in order to help you out when you're actually doing your working, maybe use different colors in the sense that you might use, for example, a black biro, all right, in order to write down the values that you are given and your answer. A blue biro in order to do the working for your addition, and the pencil in order to do the carries. Again, in order to help you out, in order to understand which is which, so you don't get confused. Okay? Kind of like
Thank you, sir.
different colors over here. All right, in order to help you understand what I'm doing.
Thank you.
Are there any questions with regards to the multiplication? All right. it seems not. Cool. Let's move on to the final thing, which I wanted to discuss with you with regards to these forms of these kinds of numbers or these kind of questions, essentially, and that would be division. Okay. So let's say that we have this following number. All right. So 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, and let's say that we're going to divide it. Okay. By 1, 0, 1. Okay. So try to represent it like so. All right. The first thing that you would need to do, all right, is you would need to take the length of bits that you have, all right, of your dividend, all right. This is known as your dividend. All right. This actually that's how what sorry, this here, this is your divisor. This is your dividend. And your answer that is going to come up here, that is going to be known as your quotient. Okay? So, essentially what we need to do is we need to take into consideration the number of bits that we have for our divisor. Alright? And starting from the most significant bits, okay, we would compare these two numbers. Okay? Now, essentially, what you need to understand, or what you need to try to do as a comparison, is to say, is this number here bigger or smaller than this number? If it is bigger, right, for these 3 bits at least, all right, if this number is bigger than this number, all right, or equal to, then over here we're going to write 1. Okay? And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take this divisor over here, 1, 0, 1, and perform a minus. Okay? So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to try to do 1, 1, 0 minus 1, 0, 1. Okay? So let's do this. So 0 minus 1, you cannot do that. So you need to follow like so. All right. This is 2 minus 1 will give us 1. 0 minus 0 will give us 0, right, which I'm going to represent with an x. And 1 minus 1, that's going to represent with an x. So far, so good?
Yeah.
Yes, so good.
Yes.
All right. Now, we need to bring in other bits. So we're going to bring in the next bit. Okay? Like so. Now what we're going to do is we're going to compare this number with this number. All right? So this number, our new sort of like dividend, if you will, with our divisor. In this case, we have 1, 1. 1, 1 is smaller than 1, 0, 1. Okay? So over here, that will give us, we will write up here, all right, actually, let's go over here, we'll write a 0. Okay? Since we've written a 0, we cannot actually do this negation, however. So what do? We'll bring down the next bit. So now our comparison is with these 3 bits versus these 3 bits. Is this dividend over here bigger or equal to this dividend right here?
Bigger.
Yes, it is. So we'll write 1, okay? And again, we'll try to negate 1, 0, 1 from this new dividend, okay? So 1 minus 1 is 0, 1 minus 0 is 1, all right, and 1 minus 1 is 0. So I'm going to represent that with an x, okay? And we need to bring down the next bit, okay? Like so. Is this number here smaller or equal to this? Yes, actually identical. So we'll have 1 over there, and we'll try to negate 1, 0, 1,
X.
which will give us all 0. Because 1 minus 1 is 0, 0 minus 0 is 0, and 1 minus 1 is 0. And we'll bring down the next bit. Alright? Is this number smaller or equal? Or rather, is this number smaller than this number? Yes, so we'll need to write 0 over here. So therefore, what we're saying is, as an answer, alright? We're saying that 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0 base 2 divided by 101 base 2 is going to give us the result of 1, 0, 1, 1, 0. Mana. So we can also check it out over here. So if I take the number that I've just written down over here, so 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0. So this divided by 101, that gives us this answer over here. Mana. Right, can you use this on Mana in your exam paper? So your exam paper, essentially you're going to be asked to write this or write on paper and then scan it and upload it for your exam, all right? So technically speaking, you can use any form of paper that you want, really and truly. So if you want to use lined paper, you can use lined paper. If you want to use graph paper or squared paper, whatever, then you can use that. All right. If you want to use printer paper, you could also as well, at least for those portions of the exam. Right. The important thing is that you try to make it as neat as possible and as legible as possible. Okay.
Sir, can you show us an example, please?
Yes, of course. Sure.
And maybe you can complement it. What if the last one would have been 1?
That was what I was going to try to show.
Okay, sorry for that.
Okay,
Sorry.
so let's say, as an example, all right, that essentially this number here, so that you know that what has happened. Essentially, if this was 1, you would have brought down 1. But this 1 is still smaller than this 101, essentially.
Okay.
So the answer in this case, all right, that were like that, would be the same for your quotient, all right, because that will remain the same, but you would have a remainder of 1.
Okay.
So this part over here is going to dictate your remainder. Right? If you cannot bring down any further numbers.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
but we can see this in a different example if you'd like. So let's start off. Change this. Double plus. Okay. Let's change this. Okay. So let's say that we have, I don't know, 1, 0. All right, and we're going to divide the number 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1. All right. So this compared to these two numbers over here, we know that this is bigger than this. Therefore, we'll write 1 and we'll negate 1, 0. Essentially, like this, right? We know that these will cancel each other out, right? These bits over here, but over here, 1 minus 0 will give us 1. We'll bring down the next bit, right? Like so. This number over here compared with this number goes in exactly, it's equal. So we'll write 1 over here. Okay. We'll negate 1, 0 again. All right. And that will cancel each other out. And we'll need to bring down the next bit. This into here. We know that this number is smaller than this number. So we'll need to write 0 over here and bring down the next bit, like so. This number here compared to this number over here, this number is actually bigger. So, right, 1, okay, and we'll negate 1, 0, like so. So therefore, this number will cancel each other out. This 1 minus 0 will be 1, and we'll bring down the next bit. Okay, so that would be 0 over here. Okay, this number over here is exactly the same size as that, so we'll have another, whoops, we'll have another 1 here. All right, and again we'll negate 1, 0. These two numbers are exactly the same, so they cross each other out. And we'll bring them down the next number, okay, or the next digit. So we'll have 1. This number here is smaller than this number over here. So we'll need to write 0 over here, but there is nothing else that we can bring down. Therefore, we can say, all right, that 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, base 2, and divided by 1, 0, base 2, is going to give me the value of 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, base 2, but with a remainder of 1. In fact, you can check this out. All right, so if we have 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, all right, and divide it by 1, 0, all right, we can see that at least with regards to the quotient part, okay, which is the answer up here, we have 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0. Unfortunately, this doesn't actually show you the remainder of this part. 2. Yeah. Is this clear, guys?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
On my side, no thanks.
I missed the remainder bit, but I got the mechanism.
You missed the remainder of it. So essentially, what we did when we brought down this last bit over here, okay, we still needed to compare this number with this, all right? 1 compared to 1, 0. 1 is smaller than 1, 0, so we need to write this 0 over here. Right? Since there was no other bits to carry down, like we were doing up to that point, okay? Then essentially that we cannot continue with our division methodology, essentially, like we were doing over here. So essentially this part here, right, would become our remainder.
All right.
All right? This would be our quotient. Okay? So essentially, quotient remainder.
Thank you.
All right? Not necessarily, it's not always going to be 1, it's always going to be malab. In this case, the remainder is always going to be 1, it can be 1 digit less in terms of length, all right, than our divisor, right? All the way up to 1. So our remainder is going to be 1, all right, so just a single digit, all the way up to a number of digits, all right, which is 1 less, all right, than the length of our divisor. Okay, so if I had a divisor, so essentially the divisor is this part over here. If my divisor happens to be 1, 0, 1, for example, then essentially my remainders are going to be, or my possible remainders can be either 1, all right, or 1, 0, all right, or 1. If you think about it, all right, if I take, this is 5, if you, or sorry, it can also be 1, 0, 0. Sorry. Essentially, if I take any number, all right. So in this case, if I take 10 and divide it by 4, all right, 4 goes into 10 2 times, but the remainder is always going to be 1 less, or can be up to 1 less of the value of my divisor. Okay?
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right? So this would be 2 remainder 2. You cannot have, when you're dividing by 4, for example, in this case, you cannot actually have a remainder of 4, because if you have a remainder of 4, then basically you can divide that again, essentially. You know? That's the idea. In this case, it happens to be for both of the examples that we were working, the remainder happened to be 1. Okay? Are there any other questions?
No.
All right, doesn't seem so. Okay. Now, so these are important for you to recognize, all right, even for with regards to the exam. Again, the best way to go about it is to practice, and as you've seen over here, the way that I was practicing was by literally coming up and creating my own problems, essentially. All right, work them out if you need to do so. All right. You can find also some calculators online which will also provide you, which would be able to do the calculations for you in order to make sure that you're actually working them out correctly. If you're finding that yourself that you're working out questions incorrectly, right, or the answer is not matching, all right, and you'd like to understand why that is, then do not hesitate to send me a message, right? Yes, some past papers will be uploaded on Moodle. Problem is that I personally don't have access to them. I had actually asked my colleague in order to upload them. He will be uploading them shortly. Alright? Unfortunately, he was a bit busy lately. I know Murray had also sent me an email for that, and I talked to him, so I'll remind him just in case he forgot. Okay?
Okay, thanks a lot.
Right. So, what we were also doing last time round was we were talking about signed integers. All right, we looked at the signed notation, and we said that basically there were a number of problems with the signed notation, most notably that addition and subtraction weren't that easy to do with signed notation. And we also saw that we also had the problem of a positive and a negative zero. And in order to fix that, we also talked a little bit about the two's complement system, all right, whereby we had positive numbers with their most significant bit starting with a zero, and the most negative numbers, all right, starting with a one. So if we were talking about a binary system of 4 bits, all right, 0 would look like this, all right. 1 would look like this. So essentially, over here we're talking binary. Over here we're talking decimal. All right, so that is going to be equal to 0. 1 is going to be equal to this. 2 will be like so. 3 will be should be like this, so that would be 3. All right, 4 will be like this. And so on and so forth. So essentially, the largest positive number that we're going to get will be 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, all right? And that would be equal to 7, okay? However, our numbering system, all right, when we actually go to the next level, essentially that would be our most negative number. So if I go for 1, 0, 0, 0 here, that would actually be minus 8. All right. If we keep on going, so 1, 0, 0, 1, for example, that would be equal to minus 7. All right. 1, 0, 1, 0. That would be equal to minus 6. And we'll keep on going until we have 1, 1, 1, 1, which is equal to minus 1. Essentially, this is our two's complement system. And if you remember the methodology that we used in order to convert from decimal into binary, all right, in two's complement was the following. So let's say I had the number minus 7, all right, and I wanted to convert this into binary, all right. Then the way that we used to go about it was ignore the negation, all right. So essentially, we'd say, all right, what does 7 look like? All right, normal positive 7. That is 1, 1, 1. All right. What does it look like within the binary system that we're talking about? If we're talking about a 4-bit binary system, then essentially it will be 0, 1, 1, 1. All right. Then what we would need to do is we would need to complement, all right, this binary number and add 1 to it. Okay. Essentially, complementing means that every 1 becomes a 0 and every 0 becomes a 1. All right. So basically the opposite. So 0 will become 1, all of these ones will become 0. Add 1, then that would become 0, 1, 0, 0, 1. And as you can see, it's the same as this number that we've calculated over here. Okay? The good thing behind two's complement is that it actually makes our addition and subtraction calculations very, very, very easy. All right. In fact, whenever we are doing addition, it is normal, simple addition of binary like we're used to. All right. When we're doing negation, essentially what we can do is we can complement the second number and then just add. Okay. So essentially what we've done is we have reduced subtraction, all right, into addition. So the same procedure, if you will then apply, which is smart if you think about it. I mean, you're using the same process, if you will, in order to do both addition as well as subtraction. So if you had to imagine it as being hard-coded, all right, on your CPU, all right, then all you need is one circuit, a circuit that knows how to do addition, as well as a circuit that knows how to do complementation, rather than having two circuits, one for addition and one for subtraction, if you know what I mean. Okay? So this is one way of actually making better use of the CPU, or in this case, the ALU. If you remember, the ALU is the one component within the CPU that is used in order to do all of your calculations. Correct? So this is a very important concept. I talked about the idea of binary extension. So remember, over here we were representing 7, all right, in 4 bits. Therefore, -7 looks like this, but we were using only 4 bits. If we were using 8 bits, all right, so let's divide this into 2. So over here we're talking about 4-bit 2's complement. On the other hand, if we have, for example, 8-bit 2's complement, okay, then essentially, if we are to represent 7, all right, 7 would look like this. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 1, 1. Essentially, you'd have 8 bits. If we follow the same exact procedure, so we complement, all right, so we complement this number, so 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, and we add 1, all right, then the result is actually going to be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, plus 1. So essentially, -7 is now going to look like this. So the only sort of like common ground are these last 4 bits over here. These are basically what we know as a sign extension. If it is negative, all right, the additional bits that we need in order to represent that number will be represented with 1s. If we're talking about positive, then all of those additional bit needs to be represented with 0s. Does this make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It does, but are you saying that the 2's complement is to be considered in a predetermined number of bit
Yes.
environment? Okay, alright.
Yes. Yes. Definitely.
Which
In
then
fact, whenever you're going to be asked to work with 2's complement numbers, you're always going to be told, listen, you're using 5 bits, 7 bits, 8 bits, all right, and so on and so forth.
That
Because
makes
that's actually going to make a difference.
it does. But in turn, it only affects the sign extension ultimately. But you work within
It's not the only thing, all right. Obviously, the number of bits in turn is going to also affect the effective range that you're going to of the numbering system. Right?
Exactly. Yes, that's also true. Okay.
So, in fact, that leads on to my next point. All right, whereby this is basically the idea of addition in 2's complement. Over here, if we have -2 and we add -1, essentially the result will actually become -3. How is this actually possible? All right. So if you take into consideration that as being -2, and we're adding -1, all right. Essentially, the answer, all right. You can already, for example, see that we have carry bits that we're not actually taking into consideration. All right, which is this one. This is not considered, and essentially, sorry, this shouldn't be here. This actually should be a 0. It's 1. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 0. Carry the 1. This part over here is what is actually considered. This here is known as overflow. Why is it important? Well, since over here we're representing numbers in 4 bits, all right? Then any number that goes beyond the range of number of bits of our calculation is going to be completely ignored. Now, in this case, it's not going to actually have an effect on the overall outcome. In fact, we're relying on it. All right, it's because of this quirk that we can actually perform these kind of calculations. However, there are situations, all right, where you would get what is known as a numerical overflow. All right, this is a bitwise overflow. A numerical overflow is basically when, all right, you are performing a calculation, all right, which the result of which is going to go beyond the range of the numbering system that you're going to have. Okay? So, if we take into consideration this particular situation, okay, in a 4-bit numbering system, all right, we can go from -8 all the way to +7. So -8, -7, -6, -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That is the range of numbers that we can represent with a 2-bit, with a 4-bit 2's complement binary number. Okay? However, if I'm trying to add the number 4 with the number 6, as we can see over here, okay, the result is actually going to overflow, all right, outside of the range, because 10 is outside of the range of our numbering system. Okay, so much so that we're actually going to get a negative number. All right, so over here we can see 0 plus 0 is 0. All right, 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 0. Carry the 1, and 1 plus 0 plus 0 is 1, 0, 1, 0. Right. In fact, if we have to look at the number that we actually used over here, as you can see, that is going to be equal to -6, which can cause us a little bit of a problem. There is no way that we can go about this, essentially, all right? The only way that you can go about this is to use more bits in order to represent the number that you're trying to represent, essentially. Okay. Now there is a very particular situation in which overflow can occur. Essentially, when the two numbers that you're performing an addition have the same sign, all right. In this case, these two numbers are both positive, all right. Then the likelihood of you having a numerical overflow, all right, is going to be greater. All right. If they were different, you're not going to get an overflow. Okay. So if you had 4 minus 6 or plus minus 6, essentially, okay, then essentially you're never going to get an overflow. But if both of them have the same sign, whether or not they're both positive or they're both negative, then the possibility of having a numerical overflow is going to increase. Okay. This is essentially what I was trying to explain just now. Are there any questions?
Are we required to work out the overflow? So say it overflows and you get 10 and it goes beyond the range.
Manna, you might be asked, all right, you have these two 2's complement numbers, and let's say that your 2's complement system is 8 bits, for example, and you are asked to see whether there is a numerical overflow within your result, i.e., the result that you've obtained, does it actually represent the result that you should be getting, yes or no? And you need to justify your answer.
All right, no
All
problem.
right?
Okay.
That's the idea, essentially.
Okay, I asked because I couldn't understand why we went to minus 6 after we got 10 as a result of the overflow.
But we know that 4 plus 6 is equal to 10.
Yes.
So I know that with the 2's complement system, 1 0 1 0, since we're working with 4 bits, that represents minus 6. Why? Because the range of numbers that I can actually represent for a 4-bit 2's complement system is from minus 8 all the way to 7. So 10 is beyond the range of that particular 2's complement system.
Echo.
All right. So in this case, in order for you to do a calculation of 4 plus 6, 4 bits is not enough. All right. You would need more bits. All right. Probably one more bit would suffice, but probably you'd go up to the next stage, which would be 8 bits. No? Is that clear?
Yes, better.
All right. Okay, so essentially that is the idea of the 2's complement system. All right, so as we can see, in terms of advantages, all right, it is easy to add two numbers, right? It's easy to perform subtraction. In fact, we can actually do that through the methodology of addition. Multiplication, all right, is just repeated addition, all right, and division is repeated subtraction, essentially, all right, with 2's complement numbers. In fact, 2's complement is one of the main numerical systems that is actually used within the ALU, right? The problems with the 2's complement system is, first and foremost, is that the 2's complement range, all right, for a number of bits is going to be asymmetrical. You always have one more negative number than you do positive, all right? If you remember, all right, in the previous slide, we said that for a 4-bit numbering system, we go from minus 8 to plus 7. As you can see, we have one more negative number than we do have positive ones, right? Another, yes.
So In this, since we have one more negative than the positives, would that essentially mean that the 0 is considered as a positive number here rather than a neutral?
No, 0 is always neutral. It's neither positive nor negative, really.
Okay, all right. No, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. That's all.
It's quite simple, as in, if I actually had to count the number of negative numbers, right, and count the number of positive numbers, I would have one more negative number than I would have positive numbers, because 0 is not a negative or it's not a positive, really. It's just 0. It's nothing.
All right. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Mala. Another issue that you might see over here, within this representation over here, is that it is very hard, all right, in order to be able to judge which number is bigger and which number is smaller. Comparison, if you will. If I had to compare positive numbers with each other, I know that, for example, the value of 1 in terms of binary is smaller than the value of 3. That's quite simple, all right? But if I had to compare the value of 1 with -1, for example, all right, at first glance, it's not obvious that the value of 1, all right, the binary value for 1, is actually bigger than -1, you know? At first glance, it seems to be counterintuitive. And that's, sorry.
So it will always tell us, I guess, say that's in two's complement. As in when you're going to read binary, because if it's 1010, for example, it's -6. I mean, you have to know that it is in two's complement, I guess.
Yes, of course. But if in two's complement, the first giveaway is going to be the most significant bit. All right, the most significant bit is automatically going to tell you whether it's going to be negative or positive. Right? Notice what happens over here between 1 and 2. All right, in binary. Okay, we know that this number is smaller than this number. Would you not agree?
Yes.
But if you look at the similar pattern over here, it's actually the other way around.
The other way around, just with a 1 in front, showing you that it's negative, basically.
Exactly. So this is not going to be that easy. That's what I'm trying to point out here. All right. The same patterns that you would have for positives are going to be inversed for the negative.
All right.
You understand? And that's basically where our next numerical system is going to come into play. All right. It's known as excess notation. Okay. Essentially, the idea behind excess notation. All right. I'm just going to introduce it today. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because obviously I know that we're running out of time and probably all of us are a little bit tired as well. So the idea behind excess notation is that the progression of binary, all right, would remain exactly the same, all right, as though it were unsigned, all right. So the smallest number that you can represent in excess notation would be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 for the number of bits that you actually have. And the largest number that you would have would be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So all of them will be 1. So if we're talking 4-bit, all right, in excess notation. So, okay, the smallest number would be 4 zeros. The largest number would be 4 ones. And essentially, you would go up incrementally like we are used to, all right, with normal binary notations, all right, like so, all right, and it keeps on going up all the way up to 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, and so on and so forth. Okay. The way that excess notation works, all right, is that it introduces what is known as a bias. Right? The bias is basically the value that you are using in order to make your numbers positive. So essentially, this number here, 0, 0, 0, is not 0, but rather it is -8. This number over here is not 1, but rather -7. All right? And so on and so forth. Okay? So essentially, the true value of the number that you have, all right, is actually being modified by this bias. So if we actually had to look at it in terms of unsigned numbers, this to us would normally read as 0. This would normally be read as 1. This would normally be read as 2, and so on and so forth. Okay. However, okay, in order to get the true value, we'll need to add this bias. Now, the bias is normally, all right, calculated in terms of the number of bits that you have within your system. Right? In this case, we have 4 bits. So usually the bias is calculated like so. So the bias is going to be equal to 2 times the number of bits, all right, minus 1. So in this case, we have 2 to the 4 minus 1, which is basically 2 to the 3. All right, 2 to the 3 is actually 8, and that is our bias. All right, so we're essentially this value here that we normally associate with 0, that is actually the true value. So the true value plus the bias. This. All right. So essentially, what is going to be our true value? So our true value is going to be equal to the perceived value. All right, let's think that this is our perceived value minus the bias. If you think about it like that. So therefore, we'll need to take this perceived value and add -8 to it. All right, -8 to this. All right, -8 to the other one, and so on and so forth. And then we'll get the true value. Is this clear?
Okay, so essentially you started from the minimum amount possible. So for bits, that's -8. And
Exactly.
then you're adding the true value of it.
We're going up by 1 each and every time, in this case, right? So the what I have written over here in blue, that is the perceived value, all right? But the actual, so but the perceived value is actually the true value plus the bias. Okay?
Yeah, okay, all right. But what's the point of it then?
The point of it is that it's actually easier in order to be able to compare two numbers with each other. And
I get to see the point then, but okay.
no, that is one advantage. So, second advantage is that it's also used when it comes to talking about floating point numbers, all right? Numbers with a decimal point, essentially. Okay? But that is something that we're going to be seeing next lecture. Okay?
Okay, all right.
That's essentially the idea. Basically, we're talking about this other form of numbering system in order to understand how it works. All right. So that when we actually come across it within floating point notation, we'll be able to understand exactly why why this is important. So, can I ask roughly what percentage of marks is allocated to these types of math logic questions, computations within the exam, so we know best use our revision time? Now, it's predominantly 50-50. All right. So 50% of your exam questions will be theoretical, basically covering the material that we've talked about in class. So regarding computer hardware, operating systems, and so on and so forth. So it could be application of general knowledge. It could be fill in the blanks. It could be true or false. It could that kind of stuff. All right. With regards to the theoretical knowledge that we basically discussed in class. The other half would then be predominantly these numerical systems. So yes, this is basically half of the exam. This is why we're spending so much time to cover this material. Any other comments or questions before we call it a day?
Yeah, what I didn't understand, because basically you said the bias is 2 to the power of the number of bits, so in this case it's 4 minus 1.
Yes.
And it resulted in 8. Why did you mention the zeros as minus 8? That's what I didn't get exactly.
So this is our bias. Right? Now, what I'm saying over here is that what I have in blue here, these values, all right, those are my perceived values. All right, why? Because if I actually had to convert this into into decimal, all right,
Decimal.
so 1, 2, 4, 8, and so on and so forth, this is going to give me the value of 0. All right. This is going to give me the value of 1. This is going to give me the value of 2, and so on and so forth. Okay? Now, but that is my perceived value. Okay? My actual value, the true value, all right? Okay? Is going to be my perceived value minus the bias. All right? Basically, before. All right, when we're seeing the perceived value was like this: perceived value was equal to true value plus the bias. This is basically what is being said over here. Thus, the value x represented by the number x plus the bias. The perceived value is the true value plus the bias. If I take this onto the other side, all right. Okay, using mathematical notation, essentially I would need to negate it on both sides, right? And essentially a plus becomes a minus, and therefore my true value is actually to the perceived value minus the bias. Okay. So essentially what we're saying is, if I'm converting from decimal to binary, all right, let's say I have the value of 7 that I want to represent. Okay? So this is the number I really want to represent.
The true value.
To convert it to binary, I would need to add the bias. And then convert as though I was converting normal binary. So in this case it was 7 plus 8, alright, which would give us 15. Alright? And then I would say, alright, what would 15 look like in binary, and that would be 1111 in this case.
Alright.
If on the other hand, if I have 1111 and I want to convert it, so from binary decimal, then if I had to do the normal conversion, all right,